This episode of the Techology Show is brought to you by Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan University. Wesley Seminary offers a 75 credit hour Master of Divinity program available in both English and Spanish, a 36 credit hour Master of Arts in Ministry Leadership or in Children, Youth, and Family Ministry, and a 36 credit hour Master of Practical Theology. For more information, visit Wesley Seminary online at seminary.indwes.edu. It's Tuesday, February 18th, and live from the front seat to the Armageddon in upstate Pickens, South Carolina. I'm Matthew T.G.
I'm Steve Stanley.
Yes, he is, and I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 236, or as my math teacher would tell me to say, 236. No and there.
Yeah, well, guys, what a week.
Hey.
Last week at this time, blizzard conditions.
That's right.
This week, 70 degrees. Earthquakes have been happening all around us.
Yeah, 2 earthquakes in South Carolina this past week. Did you feel it, Steve?
No, not at all.
I didn't. Matthew, you did.
Yeah, we did. It rocked our house
there
in Liberty. It really did. It was a wild. I felt a couple. You remember in Virginia, it really impacted the Capitol when that was going on. I was up at our district campground up at Table Rock, which is up in the mountains, which is again going to feel those kinds of things. I was in the worship center and felt it was more of like a boat swing kind of thing. And of course, it was far enough away that it wasn't too severe. This one was more of someone walked up beside the house, a giant, just kind of shook it for about 10 seconds.
I was awake and I still didn't hear it, feel it, anything like that. I don't know.
You missed that.
So, Steve, welcome into the studio today. It's been a while since you've been on with us.
Well, many weeks I appear at the front door and scratch. and for whatever reason, my card no longer works.
Listen, when you paid the tribute this morning, I felt like I was kind of obliged to just...
I brought something with me that I was thinking of this on my ride over when I knew that it was going to be the three of us together again. I brought this with me.
Again. Gee, it's good to be together again. I just can't imagine that you've ever been.
There you go. I was singing this song the whole way over here.
Yes.
And I suppose that's me.
Watch our episode get pulled down here because we... All right. Well, yeah, always scares me when Matthew comes in with something. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. Hey, a guest we've had on the show a couple of times, Zach Woodfin. He is the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the Green Bay Packers, and he recently went to University of Alabama, Birmingham. He's now heading up that for the university for their football program, and left a dream job in Green Bay, and he's going to be coming on the show in a few weeks to talk about that. But he's just a wonderful believer. His heart burns within him to do what he's doing because he really wants to be formative in young men's lives, and already he's making an impact. I have a picture here, Matthew. I wonder if you could throw it up here. This is Zach, and they have a player on the team who is paralyzed from the waist down, but he's on the team. They give him full scholarship. And the player wanted to go to the top of the stadium. And so that is Zach carrying him. And by the time it was over, players had come around and they were all helping Zach to get this player up to the top of the steps. And local news agencies picked up on it. Someone's turned the story into Good Morning America, hoping that they'll cover it. But Zach is just kudos to him, a guy of extreme Christian character, and it's going to be fun having him back on the show to talk about that incident and just the impact that he's making already on the players' lives there at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. So Heath's not with us this week. You've noticed that. That's why Steve is in studio. Heath is at 12 Stone. And
which is a church in Alabama. There's a conference going on
Georgia.
there.
Let's call it
sorry,
Georgia.
yeah, Georgia. Yeah, sorry, church in Georgia. Yes, Atlanta, Georgia.
Eastern Alabama.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so I think he's trying to snag a couple of interviews while he's there. So next week he'll be back in studio and he'll be talking to us about that. For this week, let me introduce our guest. Our guest is Dr. John Oswalt. He got his PhD from Brandeis University, is visiting distinguished professor of Old Testament at Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky. He is the author of numerous articles and several books, including the 2-volume commentary on Isaiah and the New International Commentary on the Old Testament series. He's also the author of Called to be Holy, A Biblical Perspective, and again, many other books. Dr. Oswalt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
It's great having you. As I said to you in the pre-show, you were one of the most formative professors that I had when I was at Asbury Seminary. Always felt on the hot seat in a good way. Always felt stretched by you beyond my capacity. And it's really good now to have the tables reversed and for you to be on the hot seat.
Okay.
Oh, listen, we asked you on this show to talk about your book, The Bible Among the Myths. But before we jump into the book proper, there's a backdrop that needs to be set here. I wonder if you just take a little bit of time here and talk about the biblical criticism movement of the 19th and 20th century.
Yes, that is a big topic, and I'll try to be both as brief and as intelligible as possible.
Sure.
It really began in the 1700s with the growth of rationalism, the belief that everything had to be subject to human reason. And therefore, the idea that the Bible was revealed by God really was not acceptable. It had to be discoveries about God that humans had made. And that meant that the biblical story just didn't work because you have monotheism right at the outset. And that's impossible. If human wisdom is discovering truth, then that happens in an evolutionary developmental way. So you got to start with animism. Abraham must have been an animist. Yeah. And you really didn't get monotheism until you got cleared down to, second Isaiah in the late 500s AD. So the whole Bible had to be rewritten to try to make that understanding of the evolutionary development of the human discovery of God possible. And that really came to sort of its conclusion in Germany in the late 1800s with a man named Julius Wellhausen, who was finally able to put all of the theories together in a way that finally made sense to everybody. A neat evolutionary pattern where you began with, as I said, animism, and you end up with law at the very end. And that reconstruction of Israel's history and of the Bible really captured German scholarship and then British in the early years of the 20th century, and eventually American in the 1920s and 30s. And the result of that was a rapid diminution of Christian faith, because if in fact the Bible is not the result of revelation, if it is the result just of human discoveries, then who needs to stake their life on that? Why not just give it up?
Yeah, and another thing too. With that as a backdrop, the Bible itself then doesn't even. It's not actually what it pretends to be, and I use those words, in air quotes there. It's not what it pretends to be, right?
That's exactly right. That the odd thing is that these people, these Hebrew people, these Israelite people, have rewritten their history of religion to make it appear that this was all revealed by God, when in fact they know that it wasn't. Yeah. So that we're asked to believe a fiction and to stake our lives on that.
Yeah.
Well, this is the focus of your book, The Bible Among the Myths, and I'd like to invite you, if you would, to kind of unpack the central focus, the central theme of that book for us now.
Yes, thanks. In about 1950, there had occurred a significant change in German scholarship because of the theologian Karl Barth.
Yeah.
Karl Barth came out of the First World War uh, no longer believing in the supremacy of human reason and its ability to bring about human perfection. And he came back to the Bible in pretty dramatic ways. The interesting thing was, though, that on the one hand, he insisted the Bible is the revelation of God, but at the same time, he did not discredit the reconstruction of the Bible that the higher critics had created before him. So on the one hand, he's saying the truth of the Bible is from God, and in the Bible, God confronts us. And at the same time, he's admitting, yes, but the Bible has been quite reconstructed from what it originally was. But his emphasis on Revelation really made an impact on both European and especially American theologians. So that in the 50s, you found significant Old Testament scholars saying the biblical teachings cannot be explained apart from revelation. Now, where was that revelation? Well, it was in the original encounters of God with his people. We don't have those. We have the reconstructions that his people have created. But nevertheless, the biblical teachings are the result of God revealing himself. So in the 50s, you had people saying, hey, the biblical understanding of reality is very different from the pagan understanding of reality. And the only way you can explain that difference is revelation. Today, we have done almost a 180-degree turn because the inner contradiction in Barth's theology became very clear.
Yeah.
If, in fact, we can't recover what really happened when God revealed his truths to his people, how do we know these truths are revelation? In fact, they almost certainly aren't.
Yes.
And so there's been a great turning away on the left side from Barthian theology. Now, it's interesting that evangelicals are sort of recovering
Yeah.
it, and that's a tragedy, but that's beside the point. So today, denying the possibility of revelation, we're back again saying, well, Hebrew religion must have just evolved from Canaanite religion.
Yeah.
And so you have people basically saying the differences between Hebrew religion and pagan religion are not that important. It's the similarities that matter. One example, the temple of Israel, as far as we can tell, was very similar to Canaanite temples. One small difference. In the Canaanite temple, in the innermost room stood an idol. In the Hebrew temple, there was no idol.
Yeah.
But hey, that doesn't really matter, does it? The big thing is they both had temples that looked alike. So my book seeks to come back and say, wait a minute. Wherever the Bible came from, it still is teaching realities which are radically different from what the Canaanites believed. Not many gods, one God. Not this world is divine and is the body of the gods. No, God is not this world, and so forth. So that's really where the book is. And then saying, okay, if the Bible's understanding of reality is radically different from the pagans, how do you explain that?
Right.
And I then try to argue you can't explain it other than what the Bible gives us. God encountered these people in their historical experience.
Yes.
And therefore, that historical experience is important to us.
I took some time. I was reading reviews of this book on Amazon. There are, I think, 23, 24 reviews that have been posted, and one of the constant threads throughout the review is that that people are deeply appreciative of how you take the word myth and you talk about definitions and just kind of clarify what we're talking about here. So it'd probably be good for us at this point to define myth a bit and unpack that, because it's a big part of your book.
Okay. Again, what has happened is people want to say, well, the Bible is one more of the ancient Near Eastern myths. It's a little different on the surface, but at heart, it's really the same thing. But to do that, you've got to thin out the definition of myth till it's almost worthless.
Yeah.
A common definition today is a myth is a story of the gods. That's like saying an automobile is a thing with wheels. Well, it's true as far as it goes, but it includes a whole lot of stuff that is not automobile. A wheelbarrow has wheels. So is a wheelbarrow an automobile? No. So what I try to do is to say, let's look at all those things that have been called myths and see if we can find the common characteristics which they all share. Well, when we do, we discover that those things are not what the Bible is.
Yeah.
Maybe the Bible is flat out fiction, but it is not a myth.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's not myth.
Yeah.
Because myth seeks to capture what the gods are doing in the invisible world, and by retelling what they're doing, get the effects of that into this world. So you tell the creation myth in order to once again defeat chaos in this visible world. That's not what the Bible is doing.
Yeah, again, I would just say to our listeners and viewers that this is one of the strong points of your book. Let's take a little break here and again thank our sponsor and go ahead and watch this word from them.
The MDiv program at Wesley Seminary is unique in the respect that we have spiritual formation going on throughout your entire seminary career. I've been to other seminaries, I've been a seminarian at points, and usually there's the token course in spiritual formation. But here, spiritual formation is done every regular semester. When you're taking a full load, you're also taking spiritual formation because it's such a part of who you are as a minister. It's not an auxiliary part, it's not a nod at God, it's not an add-on. It's part and parcel of who you are, and you minister from the base of who you are as a person of God. And so that's always kept at the forefront here. And so in the spiritual formation program, which is a parallel track that goes on with every course that you take during a regular semester, we constantly look at different aspects of what it means to be a person of God and a person of God in ministry. Because adding that ministry dimension adds a whole different level of understanding about what it means to be connected to God. So spiritual formation in seminary is one of the ways that we keep ministers and Christian leaders connected to God as they are learning, so that the learning is always done mindful of how it affects the people of God, how it affects one's walk with God, how it empowers you to do ministry for God. God is always at the center of it. So when we are teaching and mentoring in spiritual formation, those are the things that we keep at the forefront.
Dr. Oswalt, we're deeply enjoying this discussion with you, and I really appreciate the fact that you're making this accessible in layman's terms.
Yeah, very much so.
As I said during the break, it's so clear even I'm understanding it. So I appreciate
Which is Herculean, I must say.
It constitutes a modern-day miracle, that's what we're talking about. But to understand how the Bible's different within the study of ancient Near Eastern literature, you say that there are two worldviews we need to grapple with. And you explain them with the terms continuity and transcendence. Would you take some time and unpack these for us, explaining the differences and the importance of the nuances in understanding these differences?
Yes, the worldview of continuity is, to be honest, the worldview that is shared by every religion in the world except the three that are drawn from the Old Testament: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And that worldview basically says this socio-physical cosmos is all there is. There is nothing else. And therefore, everything in this cosmos came from everything else. Everything in the cosmos is interconnected with each other. So you've got a human realm, you've got a natural realm, you've got a divine realm, but all three of those interpenetrate each other. And therefore, what's done in one realm, if I can use that word, automatically happens in the other. Mm-hmm. So if I need rain in the world of nature and it's not raining, obviously, somehow or other, the god of heaven and the goddess of earth are on the outs with each other. And I have to do something as a human to get the gods back together. And if I do, then I go down the road to my local priestess. I have sex with her. Automatically, the god and the goddess have sex. And the result is rain. I've said to students for many years, if you think about this carefully, you will never walk in the rain again. But that's the idea of continuity. Everything is linked together. This world is God, and everything in this world can be identified with God in one way or another. This is the significance of idol worship. The idol is made from natural materials, stone or wood, gold, silver, in the shape of a human, and it is a god. So the idol represents this understanding of reality. From an aboriginal religion to a very, very highly technical religion like Hinduism, the basic understanding is the same. This world is God. God is this world. Carl Sagan, who now knows better, believed this basic premise. This psycho-socio-physical world is all there is. There is nothing else. Over against that view is the idea, no, this cosmos is not all there is. There is something or someone who is outside of this cosmos, who is not part of it, who cannot be manipulated through it, who is beyond it. Now, the Greeks, Aristotle, Plato, they struggled with this idea. Such brilliant logicians. They basically said, you know, there's got to be something beyond, but they were never able to come to a conclusion about what it was. And so after Aristotle and Plato died, Greek thought plunged right back into the depths of continuity thinking. It's only among these former Egyptian slaves that the idea that there is a God who is personal, who is beyond this world, not only was thought of, but became the ruling idea in their thought. And I argue there's no way to explain that apart from revelation.
Yeah, I just kind of a follow-up here. I mean, you already mentioned it, but you say in your book on more than one occasion that there are only three religions in the world that subscribe to a transcendent God, and you mentioned it earlier, Judaism, Islam, Christianity. And so just to reiterate this point, why is that significant?
Well, the question then is that if there are only three religions that believe in monotheism, only three religions that deny the possibility of making idols, if all three of those religions come from one single source, that means only one place in the world was monotheism, transcendence, iconoclasm, the destruction of idols, ever understood and proclaimed and depended upon. And if that's true, if it all came from one single source, then I think you've got to believe in revelation.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is so central to your book. I mean, this is a real dividing line in the book, this understanding of continuity and transcendence, and the importance of understanding in ancient Near Eastern literature what the differences are as opposed to the similarities. I mean, and this is one of your major points of the book, right? That you have to understand the differences.
Yes. As I said earlier, the modern thought would say, oh, well, the Hebrews believed in one God, the pagans believed in many gods, but hey, it's all gods, huh? Well, no. If everybody around you believes there are many gods and they are identified with the forces of this world, and you alone believe that there is one God who is not this world, that is a very significant difference.
Yeah.
And you go down the list and you say, again, no idols. You cannot represent God by anything in this world when every culture around you is saturated with idols. Mm-hmm. That's a difference.
Yeah.
In Israel, magic is forbidden. Now, it's interesting. They don't say, hey, it doesn't work, like Europeans in the 19th century said. So, of course, we're not going to mess with magic because that's stupid. No. The Hebrews are simply told, you can't use magic. Why not? Because it is an attempt to use this world to manipulate God. And you can't do that. You must not do that. Yeah. Everywhere else, magic is the key. Imitative, sympathetic magic is the way you do religion, but not in Israel. Everywhere else, the gods are sexed.
Right.
They operate sexually. They relate sexually, but not this God. Yeah. This God is suprasexual.
Yes.
I used to say he's not sexed, but that's not really the point. The point is he is more than merely sexual. Everything good about masculinity is in him. Everything good about femininity is in him. But he does not function sexually. He does not produce the world sexually. So you go down the list, and there are about 15 of these that the book deals with, where on point after point, everybody else is saying one thing, and over against it, the Bible is saying something else. I insist those differences are not of accidental importance. They're of essential importance.
Yeah, very good.
The debate raging now, even within some evangelical circles, as we've alluded to earlier, is about the Bible as history. Some refer to Scripture as being history-like. Some say it's historical fiction. And you say that there are two questions that have to be addressed. The first is it fair to call the biblical accounts history? And the second is, does it matter in the end whether these accounts are historical or not? What's the thrust of your argument there?
Thanks, Steve. The real key running through all of this is, okay, if the Bible theology is radically different from the theology of everybody else around Israel, how do we explain that? When we ask the Hebrew people, how do you explain it? They don't say what, again, 19th century Europeans said, oh, well, the Hebrew people just had a genius for religion. What the Hebrew people tell us is we were knuckleheads when it came to religion. We were dragged kicking and screaming into these understandings of God. We didn't want them, but we couldn't get away from him. So they say to us, we got these ideas because God broke into our lives and explained himself in the context of our experience. Now then, the Bible comes to us as a radically different kind of document from what you read in the rest of the ancient world. Again, as is so often the case, you can find some similarities here and there. The Egyptians for a short time, believed in a kind of monotheism. But it never became the ruling understanding of their culture. In the same way, you can find in the literatures of the ancient world some examples where they're talking about human experience, and they're talking about it in a relatively objective way with a standard for judging. But no place do you have an entire national history as the basis for their religious thought. And one of the things I enjoy doing is getting students to read the Bible alongside of this other stuff. And when you're done, you say, hey, the Bible is a different thing than what we're dealing with here. It is attempting to be historical. It is attempting to look at human experience from a outside perspective, which transcendence makes possible.
Yeah.
Not merely propaganda,
Sure.
but so you have an Abraham, the father of the faith, who lies about his wife when he gets in trouble. You have a David, a man after God's own heart, who commits adultery and judicial murder. Wow, that's not propaganda. That is an attempt to say these things happened. So yes, the Bible is historical. Now, it's not historical in the sense of modern Western history. Its main purpose is not history. Its main purpose is theology. But you can't separate the theology and the history finally, because what they say to us is, you ought to believe this stuff because these things happened to us.
Yeah.
If they're lying, no, let's grant them good motives. They're lying because they love God and they love us, and they want us to believe good stuff. But if they're lying, there is no reason for me to stake my life on what they say.
Right.
It is simply the delusion of a bunch of crazy people. If a guy comes to me and says, I'm Napoleon and you ought to join my army, I'm not going to do it. I don't care how deeply he may believe he's Napoleon. He's a nut. This, of course, is the very point that C.S. Lewis was making about Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The point that has been quoted many times, and rightly so.
Yeah.
This man is not a good teacher.
Right.
He's a good teacher who claims to be God.
Right.
And that's on the same order as a man who claims to be a ham sandwich. So, yes, the Bible is historical. It's not a history book, but it is historical. And it does matter whether these things happen or not.
You know, it's interesting you should bring up C.S. Lewis. I mean, a lot of Platonic thought is in Lewis's writings in Narnia, this idea that, you know, the man in the cave, that there is a reality, that this world is a reflection of a greater reality, and he uses that kind of as a metaphor throughout his children's series, The Chronicles of Narnia. I wanted to bring up something. We actually talked in the pre-show. I think it was 3 weeks ago. We had Lois Tverberg on our program to talk about her book, Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus. And one of the things that disturbed me when I first read her book was she talks about her first encounter in a Bible class, and the approach clearly was from a biblical criticism point of view. That was the lens that was used. And so it really turned Lois off. I mean, she you know, because she didn't see the Bible as authoritative at all. And it was due to something that happened some years later where someone had taken the scriptures seriously, and it ignited, you know, this fire under her, and she's produced a lot of great stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, this is one of the great concerns, isn't it? That if this is the only lens through which students are being exposed to the scriptures are being hijacked from the very beginning.
Right.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. It has happened. It has happened again and again and again for the last 150 years in Germany, in England, in America. You have these good, godly people who come with their faith to the Bible, and they are told, in fact, the Bible is not what it claims to be. This theology is not resting on any historical realities. It's just out there in the air, but you ought to believe it. And then the teachers are surprised when their students jettison the whole thing.
Yeah.
One of my teachers said to me years ago, remember, John, your students will be more logical than you are. Can you keep your faith and accept the whole higher critical approach to the Bible? Yes, you can. It's amazing how resilient faith is. The problem is your followers will be more logical than you are.
Yeah.
And that has happened.
Yes.
And it's happening again and again. It's amazing that we who are, for want of a better word, fundamentalist, keep providing the great universities with students, because the great universities are not producing believers themselves.
Right.
You know, one of the things I said to Lois in the interview was that what makes her books so powerful is that she digs out these truths, but the central thing is that the book has no power if you don't believe this stuff is true.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Oswalt, what a pleasure. I thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. We know you have a busy schedule, and your gift is...
Thank you for having me. I'm so appreciative.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and Lord bless you, and maybe in the future we can get you on to discuss some of your other books as well.
Oh, yes.
I'd enjoy that.
All right. Lord be with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, good stuff.
What
Steve,
an honor.
Yeah,
What
Steve,
an
you
honor.
even told a story in the pre-show. You don't have to give names. You don't even have to give context. Be real general. But you actually one time ran across someone that at one time was studying for the ministry, and they, the only view that they were exposed to was biblical criticism view, and kind of share that story.
Well, they and their husband was a young lady, and she and her husband had come to this particular institution to study in order to be church planters. That early urge they had was to spread the good news about Jesus. They were enthused, vibrant. You'd have to be to set aside secular vocations and your first 4 years of college and go pursue what's obviously for most people as a church planter going to be a low income, very difficult, challenging circumstance. And now at the end of their matriculation there, I ask, well, you know, where are you going to be serving? What's your ministerial ambitions? Now, they don't even go to church. They don't go to church. They had lost their faith, and it had been taken from them by what I am sure are well-meaning professors who taught them to distrust this sure word of God.
Yeah.
And so she said it, and tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke to me about it. And it was to my heart. At that very time, I was using Dr. Oswalt's 2-volume set on Isaiah, my own self in another circumstance. And it was to my heart a reminder that not only do we have the Word of God, and we're blessed with that, but we're blessed with men and women of God who are still, in a very scholarly way, saying you can trust this book.
Yeah, and that was going to be my point here, that the scholarship that not only Dr. Oswalt, but men and women like him produce is absolute quality. Mm-hmm. I mean, world-class stuff.
They're producing commentaries for the most highly respected commentary series in the world.
Yeah. You know, very good. It's wonderful having him on, and we'll try to get him in the future. I was just thinking of his book, Matthew, the one he did for the pastors' gathering.
Yeah, Called to be Holy is a powerful book in my life.
Yeah, so we need to work something out and get him off of that.
He's got all kinds of good stuff. I mean, just a conversation on Isaiah, that's something I've never heard him talk about, and it'd be just be a fantastic show.
Yeah, I think he's author of like 21 or 22 books, something like that.
Those 2 books are expensive, but I will say this: you can't understand the New Testament without understanding Isaiah, because everybody from John the Baptist through Jesus' very first sermon that's recorded takes its text from the book of Isaiah, and those 2 books they ought to be in every pastor's library.
I agree. Oh man, they're the gold standard.
They are,
especially if you
I
are
like
studying.
that term.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I coin that term?
You can coin it in gold if you want.
All right, let's keep this train on the rails. It's now time for
Download of the week.
Yay!
What you got for us? A virus?
Only for you,
Want some
Steve.
malware? We've got it. No, this is an app that Matthew brought to us probably about a year and a half ago. I have used it and just wanted to bring it back up again. It's called Paper Karma, and this thing, it works. It actually works.
Yeah, and karma, kind of like Dr. Oswalt was talking about. I mean, it's so. Wish we could have kept him on the show a little bit longer.
Put your fingers like this. Please cross your legs.
Oh my goodness.
No, this is
Make
an
fun of my
app that is
friends.
available on both iOS and Android. Is that something you can mirror up there?
No,
Yeah,
not today.
okay.
We're just not ready for it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we put the link to the show, and what happens is many of you know what we all have experienced here, and that is junk mail. And you just get tired of getting this stuff and you throw it away. Well, Paper Karma, once you get this junk mail, you have an account with Paper Karma, and then you take your phone, you take a picture of the junk mail, and making sure that it's a decent picture, especially of the return address, the company that's sending out the junk mail, and once you take the picture, you send it to Paper Karma, and you say unsubscribe. I don't want that sent here anymore. Now, it may take a few weeks for it to get out of the cycle, but it gets out of the cycle.
Yeah.
And
So
my junk mail has gone to almost zero since using this.
yeah, it's pretty fantastic. So in the same way that like you get junk mail in your email, and there's always by law they have to have a little unsubscribe thing where you click that, you can go through and you can stop those mailings from coming to your email account. Well, essentially this is that for your actual mailbox.
So let me get this. Let me get this straight. You're talking about real mail,
Right.
that comes to your door.
real
You know,
physical
and
junk mail.
You get every
Great.
day. You get like a
Yeah.
fistful of stuff. And so Matthew,
Yeah,
talked
like
to-
from Wesleyan headquarters. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding.
And so about a year and a half ago, Matthew, we did it as a download. Well, I tried it and was really religious with it at first. I mean, use it. And Matthew said it may take a few weeks. So at first, and then like a couple months later, it was like, hey, this is working. So then I started using it again, and now my junk mail is almost zero.
Yeah.
Save the trees.
So in the same way that like by law, people who send you junk mail, if you contact them and say take me off, they have to do it, and they just automate that process. Paper Karma is sending them the thing saying take this address out of your system.
That's great.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, now it's time for They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
Families affected by serious mental illness, like my own, have many things in common. Secrecy, confusion, alienation, exhaustion, fear, even terror. Anger, frustration, loneliness, longing to be normal. Amy Simpson, in her review of Suzanne Field's book on mental illness entitled The Painted Table, she says Field's book honors reality. No sensationalized or romanticized pictures of mental illness here. Source, Christianity Today.
The cutoff for the consumer versions of Windows 7 Home Basic, Home Premium, and Ultimate has been reinstated. Those versions will stop being available as OEM pre-installs on October 31st, 2014. But for the corporate-oriented professional SKU, there's no firm date for when these OEMs sales will end. Instead, there's a footnote saying that the company will give at least 1 year of notice before any cutoff date is actually set. Correspondent Peter Bright reporting Microsoft's recent timetable for having Windows 7 pre-installed on new computers shut down. Source, Ars Technica.
If Congress can open with a prayer and the state of Alabama legislature can, I don't see why schools can't. They could read the prayer from the day war was declared in World War II. They could read the prayer the day after September 11th. Alabama Republican lawmaker Steve Hurst, sponsor of a bill that would require Alabama schools to begin each day with prayer. Source, Christian Headlines.
Late last year, I was easily getting 720p and 1080p video on all my devices. Now, I can barely get video to stream at the lowest resolution, which doesn't even give VHS a run for its money. I've looked online, and many others are also raging about the dreaded combination of Comcast and Netflix. Matt Vukas, an Indiana University student who seems to have verified that Comcast is intentionally throttling Netflix. Source, Matt Vukas blog. All right, so let's just start with this last story, work our way up. You might not be a Netflix fan and think, well, this doesn't even affect me. But this is a story that everyone who's using the internet should care about.
Right.
So here's what Matt Vukas does. His Netflix account, he's trying to stream videos. It doesn't go well. It's getting worse all the time. And so he uses Indiana University's what's called a VPN.
Let's back up a little bit. So he tests his connection through Comcast to the Netflix servers to see what kind of speed he's getting communicating directly with them through his home internet service.
Yeah.
And it's horrendous. It's really slow.
Yeah, it's very poor.
Not nearly what he's paying for.
Yeah, and so then he goes to Indiana's what's called a virtual private network. And so now Comcast cannot see, even though they're the backbone for that, they supply the internet service for Indiana University. They can't see now what is being streamed, and all of a sudden his download speed for Netflix, he runs the same test speed. Well, it's up to what it ought to be. Now, here's what you need to know. Comcast also has an on-demand streaming service where he could stream stuff from Comcast just fine from their service, but not Netflix. And so what you have is Comcast, who is intentionally throttling the use of something. Now, you may not give a rip about Netflix, but what if it is something that you're
what if it's Christian content?
Exactly.
What if it's your political party content?
Exactly.
What if it's minority voices that deserve to be heard in our society, and it can be relegated to the actual? Yeah.
And there's a movement afoot that doesn't get a lot of traction, but it's called net neutrality. The idea is this: that internet pipes should be dumb pipes.
Mm-hmm.
They should not know what's going through. They just offer a service, just like your electricity. I mean, electricity comes through. It comes through indiscriminately. It just comes through. This is something that we ought to be outraged about.
So we've been talking about this for a long time. Is the internet a
utility?
A utility, and should it be considered that way? Now, when we do that brings some repercussions to us, because we might be paying for internet differently. We don't pay to say you have all you can eat power, and you pay on your power bill. No, you pay $70 a month. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Right. It is metered. So the more you use, the more you pay. Would we care?
Yes.
I'd be very interested.
Right there.
I'd be very interested to see what would change in my life if my internet usage was metered instead of a la carte.
Well, Mom, I'd email you, but
snail mail would come back with a vengeance.
No, I mean, isn't that interesting to think about?
No, you're right. So if you begin to view this as a utility, then the whole pay scale, the structure might change.
That in itself could be another form of censorship or discrimination. There are some things, like our podcast here, that are intensive when they're streaming.
We take so much bandwidth. Only the higher echelon of people would be able to watch the technology. Only the wealthiest of the wealthy.
But seriously, when we were at the general conference, I mean, to talk about the experience there.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so we had to pay to have internet access there, and we'd gone 3 days, and we'd live stream, not 24/7, but almost 12 hours nonstop. The whole conference as we're offering commentary about what's happening and doing all that. It was a blast. But on day 3, all of a sudden, everything just shut down. And we thought, oh my goodness, what is going on? You know, something has happened. And we were working for a while, and where we were getting some great, fantastic upload speeds, now we had nothing, and we were essentially killed. And I thought to contact the conference center that provided that and said, has something happened? Are we being throttled now? We weren't aware of any sort of limits, and we had used so much data. We were using more data than anybody else at General Conference.
The whole complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my point...
That a switch, an automated switch had been tripped. We'd hit a level that they said nobody who had ever been at that conference before had ever flipped that
this is
switch.
Lexington, the Rupp Arena Conference Center.
Nobody had ever used as much data as the Technology Show, had used.
But did you tell them the content justified it?
Well, they turned the
switch off.
because they said, you know, we were just trying. Yeah, I mean, essentially, our goal here is to keep somebody from abusing it. Now, we weren't. Our intention wasn't to abuse it. We were trying to provide this as a service to people. And when they knew that, they turned it back on, and we were very gracious to the people who worked with us on that.
But your response was that Technology Show wouldn't be affected by it. I argue it would. If I as an individual, you said that the big dogs, if I as an individual have to pay an increased amount of money to watch the Technology Show, what are the chances that I'm going to give it a first look?
Right. Oh, I agree. I mean, this would impact a lot of stuff.
It would change the fact that it would represent.
That's what I'm saying. It would impact a lot of stuff. It would impact a lot of stuff for me. I mean, Ashley and I, while Tony said you may not care about Netflix, we care very deeply about Netflix, and we are constantly using it. It would be a whole restructuring of how we consume.
Come out of there.
Off of Netflix. No. What?
No wonder why they're not spiritual. I didn't even know.
That was dirty.
Real quick, the Alabama thing. So I appreciate Steve Hurst, and I understand his heart on this. Mm-hmm. He introduced a bill now to the House there in Alabama, wanting to get morning prayer reestablished. Yeah. But I would not be a supporter of this, not because I don't support prayer. It's because in our pluralistic society, that's not going to stand. If it's approved, it will be approved understanding that Muslim prayers would be read, other religions, maybe something of an Eastern mysticism slant. And so, I mean, I feel like that it wouldn't be a good thing.
First of all, is it the purpose of the school to educate children in a particular religious faith? I argue there was a time as an extension of the community when that was expected, but that time is long gone. Yeah. Second of all, you're not going to like this answer, and this is going to get you angry responses. I'm really not in favor of public education.
This is why we don't have you on the show.
I think it needs to be back in the hands of the churches and the local communities. And people say, well, oh, man, there'd be gaps, there'd be uneven education. What do we have now? I mean, you cannot argue that the situation in the classroom across America is equal. It certainly is not. And I think to bring it home and fund it locally, would there be people that would miss out? Yes, just as there are today. Right. And we would have to work hard to keep after that, to make it equal. There's all kinds of extrapolation that I don't have time to go into now. But that would be my answer to this. And then if you've got First Baptist that wants to have their own church school and they want to have prayer and indoctrinate their children, absolutely. First Wesleyan can do it, whoever, whatever.
Yeah, totally different. Yeah, and as far as inequities are concerned, I remind people all the time that the first voucher system that was floated in the United States was in the city of Milwaukee, a state that I'm from, city of Milwaukee, inner city, and kids were their test scores were awful within the public school system, and you had predominantly poor African American families who were begging the state to say, give us a voucher so that we can send our kids to the top performing schools in the inner city, and most of those were parochial schools, Catholic parochial schools. They got that. It was a test that was run back in the 90s. They are still doing it today, and these kids who were performing poorly in the schools they were trapped in when they got out of those schools. But get this, Steve. Public schools are performing better now in the inner city of Milwaukee.
Right.
Why?
Competition.
Well, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me say, that if the church is being perceived as irrelevant, or communities no longer feel they have a voice or expression in the education of their children, there's a reason for that. And if you want to recapture it, you have to stand up to the plate and not only do things for your own and your own little community just for us and ours, but you have to join hands.
Absolutely.
And you have to reach out to others of like mind. And it has to become a community again.
Yeah.
Right now, I would argue that the single greatest threat to the spirit of community and neighborliness in America is not even the fact that our homes are air conditioned and we no longer have front porches, which means that we go inside and don't speak to anybody, but the fact that I know if I fail, I don't need you. Your opinion is irrelevant to me. All I have to do is look to Washington. Well, if I'm reading the tea leaves out of Washington properly, the day is coming when a lot of that help is not going to be available. And guess who we're going to have?
Each
Neighbors
other.
and churches
Yeah,
again.
right.
So we need to.
Which
to
wouldn't be
practice.
bad.
No,
Which
it
wouldn't be bad. Yeah.
Wouldn't be perfect, but it wouldn't be bad.
Windows 7. So to buy a
please.
brand new computer with Windows 7 installed on it,
Yes.
Microsoft is saying that OEMs cannot do that past October 31st, 2014. So if you are in the market for a new PC sometime this year, my advice to you is buy it before October 31st because I think Windows 8 is a mess.
Yeah, it is.
Even with the new even with the new update 8.1, it's a mess right now. It's kind of a Frankenstein, but they're already waffling, for businesses. They're saying now they're extending it at least another year. Well, it's because businesses are just not switching over to Windows 8.
No, Tony, what if I want to use Windows XP? I mean, and Windows XP was just
keep
the
using
best
it, Matthew.
OS.
Just keep using it.
Okay.
No, there's no support for Windows XP past April 14th. And some of you, we had a person in our church, she came to me and she said, someone at work told me that just because Microsoft's not going to be doing security updates, that's no big deal. You can just keep using it. You don't need the updates. That is nonsense. I'm telling you, there are a community of hackers right now who are waiting for April 14th because XP has such a large user base still that they're going to exploit that to high heaven. So if you're on XP, you got to get off XP by April 14th.
My experience, I have a laptop computer, and I know on this show I get no respect for my computer choices, my smartphone choices,
None
or anything
whatsoever.
else.
Nope.
I am regularly heaped with scorn when I come in here because of the things that happen.
So much so, show the users your laptop computer today. Show the listeners or the viewers your.
There it is. There it is.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. I think the score is equal now. When I comment about your sermons and your kind of
Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
But I was sitting there working on a paper that was due in 2 weeks, and in the PhD program, this is heady stuff. You're compressing, and your stuff is. I lost every single thing on the computer. If I hadn't done a backup of those documents a couple of weeks before, and I've lost 2 weeks worth of stuff because Windows 8 came up and said it was going to update to Windows 8.1. Well, I tried to escape out of it, couldn't do that. I rebooted, couldn't. It popped up first thing. It wouldn't let me continue and once it continued, it scrambled everything on the hard drive. I took the hard drive out, plugged it into another computer to use it as a slave, and I couldn't recover a thing. So thank you, Microsoft Windows.
Matthew,
That's my bitterness for
maybe
the
our
week.
brother here needs to switch to a Mac.
Yeah, we've been saying that for how many years have we been doing this show now,
Learning
Tony?
curve. I'd probably die before I learned how to input.
That's not true. But hey, now Paul Tillman brings up an interesting point in our chat room
What's
today.
that?
He says that most ATMs are based off of Windows XP.
Derivatives of, and Mary Jo Foley says she's an expert in the
enterprise
business.
software.
Yeah,
right?
and she says that they'll continue to support those, but just for the user, the home user.
I have a question about this next.
All right,
one.
Steve, you have a
Why is
question?
it whenever there's an article
Please raise your
about
hand.
Mental
families
illness.
with mental illness, and it has the phrase in it, like my own, I'm the one that's tapped
Because
to read it.
we need people to speak out of their strengths, not their weaknesses, Steve. You know that. You know, we have talked about this before, usually in the context that the church does a really poor job with mental illness, and I think some people don't even bother to jump into the nuances. So here's a book. Follow our link. It's a book that I recommend. Now, I haven't read it. My reason for recommending it is because it's a novel that a woman writes, but here is a lady that does the review who has she's a believer, has mental illness in her family.
Christianity Today.
Yeah. And says, this really gives you an unvarnished, she feels like the author's done a great job and can bring some so my whole motive here is can bring some understanding to what families are going through. And Amy Simpson, who does the review of the book, says that part of the problem in the church is that we're silent about it. And she said if we could at least kind of lose the silence, act as though people don't have the plague, that maybe we can get the ball further down the field. So just recommend
Somebody breaks a leg, we understand that. They have a heart attack, we understand that. But if somebody has a mental illness, we don't understand it at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
And how can we be fulfilling the scripture that says, to bear the infirmities of one another and to support the weak, and many other scriptures like that.
All right, hey Matthew, let's talk a little bit here about our affiliate link.
Yeah, so we have got a way for you to help us out as a show. We of course thank our sponsor this week, Wesley Seminary, for giving to make this show happen. But another way that you, the listener, can support the show is by doing your shopping at Amazon.com. Starting at our website. If you go to thetechologyshow.com and you click the little Amazon logo there, or just head over to techallo.gy/shop, that'll take you, it's our short link version of that, that'll take you right to the front page of Amazon. Nothing's different for you. The only thing that's different is Amazon knows that we sent you, and just tell Amazon that the Techology Show sent you, and we get a little cut of everything that you did. And this week we do have a purchase of the week, and it is an alphabet mystery puzzle. F is for feline. So somebody who loves cats, and essentially the mystery puzzle, I'll have a link to it there in the show notes, but it is 2 puzzles put in the same bag that as you put the puzzle together, you don't know which piece goes with which puzzle, just to make it more challenging for those puzzlers out there. Somebody bought that this week. I think I know who it was.
So in other words, it's kind of like Minister's end of the year report.
You don't know what goes where. You just throw it together and try. Yeah. But definitely do that. And
pounding them into place.
If you use Google Chrome, Zach Burnham, a friend of the show, created an extension for Google Chrome that you don't even have to start at the Techology Show. You install this. You go to Amazon and automatically it's taken care of, and we get the affiliate link through that. You can head over to thetechologyshow.com/Chrome. It'll take you right to the spot to install that extension, and I've installed it on my parents' computers. So,
well, listen, also, if you're looking for an effective way to get a word out about your organization, business, or nonprofit, why not consider sponsoring an episode of the Techology Show like Wesley Seminary is doing? We believe that we have a product that can allow your product to live on for months and years to come. And so if you're interested, go to thetechologyshow.com/sponsor. Over the next 2 weeks, next week we'll have Jason Butler with us discussing his book, Dangerous Presence. And then the week after, someone that Matthew and I know, a friend, Julian Cattle, will be with us. He is an engineer who is working in Haiti and has just some one story in particular that is just fascinating.
Yes, the rat running up his leg. It's just like when you guys hear this story, you're going to be blown away.
Wasn't the one I was thinking about, but that's going to be fun, talking to Julian about that. And then on March the 11th, Kara Powell will be with us, discuss her book, Sticky Faith. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechologyshow.com. If you want to contact us, you can send your emails to thetechologyshow@gmail.com, or better yet, why not call us at 3049-TEOLOGY. Leave us a message, and we may even play your comments on the air. For Steve and for Matthew, I thank you for being with us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Oh, where's he?
Adios.
Yeah. No idea.